Mary asks, any more suggestions on determining grain direction on 2.5mm Davey board? I'm having an awful time figuring it out. Some board, usually very stiff board, can be very hard to tell the grain direction, especially in smaller pieces. I don't have Davey board, but the 2.4mm binders board I use is very stiff, and using the bend test, the grain direction can be very subtle. It's easier to tell the grain direction in larger sheets. The first sheet I'm demonstrating with is a thin 1mm sheet, and the grain direction is obvious. But then when I swap to the 2.4mm sheet, it still isn't obvious in the full sheet. Of course, when you buy the full sheets, the supplier will tell you what the grain direction is, but it's a good idea to check anyway. Before cutting up a full sheet, it can be a good idea to draw lines on it in the grain direction. Once the sheet is cut up, the lines will tell you the grain direction on the smaller pieces. But let's say you didn't mark the sheets before cutting, or you bought the board already cut. The foolproof test is to see how the board reacts to water by wetting one full side. I'll start by testing the 1mm board, which has a very obvious grain and reacts dramatically to the moisture. I've sped up the board warping by 8 times. In real time it took 45 seconds to warp in the video, which is fast enough you could see it move in real time. The thicker board didn't warp as much, but it was certainly enough to be sure of the grain direction. This is a definitive test for testing the grain direction in stiff board. You can recover the board fine by putting it between some blotters and pressing boards and putting it under a bit of weight, such as a brick. In my main video on grain direction, I did suggest that you can consider handmade paper to have 2 grain directions, and sometimes one is stronger than the other. It is often said that handmade paper doesn't have a grain direction. But my experience is that handmade paper stretches in both directions, as is expected, but sometimes more in one direction than the other. By thinking of this as being a grain in both directions, it reminds you to factor in the stretch in both directions and to be mindful that the stretch may be different in each. Occasionally I find board that also acts like it has 2 grain directions. It tries to warp in both directions, which usually results in it warping diagonally. I don't see it often, but it's worth watching out for. I hope this short video helps with determining the grain direction of your difficult to read board. As always, I really appreciate you hitting the like button. You can support the making of more videos like this through Patreon. If you want to be notified of my future videos, please hit the subscribe button and select the notification bell. Until next time, cheerio.